Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Montana Lifestyles Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. We're right now in the awesome show, the Great Western Show, happening at the Montana Expo Park in Great Falls, Montana. By the time you're seeing this, the show will have been done, but there are some truly amazing artists here, and I love to capture the stories and learn about some of what these artists are doing to make their art so unique, so special, and so different from every other artist here. You walk around this place and you're inspired by one artist and another because each person is different. I have Nolan Parson with me here, and Nolan, your stuff is beautiful. I love your choice of models. I personally like the female characters that you do. They all feel like they belong on a book cover or something of that nature. I love your work. Tell me a little bit about what inspires you.
Well, thank you for, talking.
Oh, yeah.
First off, I probably am inspired a lot by art that has come before me.
Of course.
I'm one of those guys that just go, hey, a lot was accomplished before I was born.
Yeah.
And personally, I am inspired mainly by people. I think people's stories, who they are, what they do to me is most fascinating. And so if I can catch something like that in my art with a person, either not just in their facial expressions, but their whole body language. And I have to admit, absolutely love history, and part of history, as far as people are concerned, actually is fashion. So at one time I thought, I might have been a fashion photographer, but I just love drawing people better than than just taking photographs, and so that's kind of a big thing. But I'm probably also inspired a lot by the golden age of illustration here in America, and that tradition of narrative fine art. I call it narrative fine art. I don't put a lot of distinction between illustration and fine art, but there is to me something that's a narrative fine art versus a concept fine art. But anyway,
so let's talk a little bit about some of the mediums that you like to use. You're an oil painter, right, mainly?
Well, I am doing oil right now. I have to admit that's kind of a personal choice. I probably think better in water-based medium.
Oh, really?
Watercolor and gouache, and to a degree acrylic. But there's some things you can learn about control and making you kind of slow down and think a little bit more that happens in oil painting than maybe a more quicker medium. And so that's why I kind of are heading in that direction for right now. At least ways I told myself I'm going to paint just in oil and I think I started this about 3 years ago. I think I've got about another year of self-imposed.
No, that's what we got to do.
Water drought. And then I'll probably come back to it and start work both ways. So,
and it'll affect your water and your acrylic techniques by millions of miles.
The thing of it that's been kind of the trickiest part was the fact that with watercolor and acrylic, for the most part, it's really, really smooth. And so learning how to use texture intellectually, in other words, not just trying to put texture on the paint, but actually get it to actually accomplish something. That's something that's kind of really intriguing me. And as I talk to different artists, it's actually kind of a critical thing. Historically, Rembrandt, a lot of those people used texture, actual texture, not visual texture. I'm great at visual texture, no matter what media I'm using. But anyway. So
but when you're having to build up your paint, like we see so many artists around here when they're doing their highlights and things like that, and you realize that they've literally built up a layer of impasto kind of paint on top
that will catch the light different, and you can, that's the closest thing us people that are working with pigments and dyes versus actual light. That's a chance we get to have the light kind of help us, depending on the light. Situation where the painting ends up. But,
as us watercolorists, as we're having to think in reverse of everyone else until you introduce some gouache into it. Now I know that there's traditionalists that are like gouache and watercolors don't mix, and I'm like, I think they do pretty well.
Historically, if you get back in the 19th century, that's not quite how those old guys did it. So That's kind of the direction I go.
The only thing that calls me out about gouache that I struggle with is how chalky it feels like it becomes.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that was its strength, especially in the world of illustration, because it photographs.
Yes, photographs
fantastic.
awesome because it's
and
matte.
dries really quick.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, you do get to have the feeling if you want to build something up. My technique with that is I do things pretty much a transparent watercolor almost all the way through, and then come back and decide where I'm going to put the opaque to kind of have more of a finished look.
Yeah,
but I have to admit I love that flat feel to it. So
it almost runs into the direction of a pastel kind of a look.
Yes.
And what a cool way to get that pastel look by getting to paint it. So it helps us watercolorists. Now let's talk a little bit about. So we go the direction now. You've messed around with acrylics as well.
Yes. If I have to go do something really really fast, acrylics the theme because while gouache is opaque. It never stays permanent until you try and seal it. Where acrylic, you can do the same thing with acrylic that you can with watercolor and gouache.
And lock it.
But if as soon as it's dry, you can come over and paint. You don't have to worry about anything bleeding through. And sometimes that can be a tricky thing with gouache.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I keep having this question in my head. Oh, now I recall. What brands do you like to use for your paints?
You know what? I'm the type of guy that's always experimenting
Me too.
With different types of paints. And maybe we'll just throw this out for people that are kind of thinking about it. The difference between a tube of red cadmium light in you might say a cheaper brand that might be like $10-12 a tube versus another one that's like 40 or 50 or maybe even $100 a tube is the purity of the pigment. And some people kind of get to the point that they just go, I have to know when I squish out a dab of paint, it's going to be consistent and clean the whole time. So far, I haven't quite done that, and especially, and maybe it's the fact that when I do acrylic, I have to admit I go to Walmart and say, okay, these are the colors I'm going to, and you can buy those little things for $1. And I can get I want to do this color scheme. But they are chalky, and one jar is different from another. But if it's just one painting I'm working on, then it isn't really critical to me.
I would say, for me personally, I have not trained enough to feel the intensity of the pigment and the necessity of a purest pigment.
And I think though, if you were like say an artist, especially if you were painting live from a figurative type painting in your studio where the light's going to be pretty consistent for you all the way the time, that's when you'd probably really want to start looking at some of your higher end paints, because where your painting's fairly consistent, even if you're changing drapery and stuff like that that's going to affect color. That's when you just go, hey, I got to have this every time.
And what about your brushes? You got any brushes that you lean towards?
Again, brushes. When I was young, and I've been painting now for, I guess, close to 50 years, especially watercolor, the better the brush. But back then, there was no such thing as synthetic sable.
That's true.
It was just sable.
And they cost a fortune.
And they cost a fortune, and but now, just like a lot of other technology, synthetic sables are coming better and better and better, and I still know nothing will ever be this. You'll never be able to get a real sable. Kolinsky type sable with a real point that's just going to last forever. But I have to admit, I'm kind of rough on my brushes, and so I've had a hard time paying a lot of money for them. So again, I use a lot of filberts, small, because that's another thing with watercolor. I haven't really painted that large with it, and so even with my oils, 24-36 for size is kind of pushing it. And if you're going to beat things up, and I have to admit, I'm kind of more of a dry, scrub it, scumble, I guess as they call it.
Scumbles. That will
painter,
take out a brush pretty quick.
But But I still like synthetic sables for
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I go through a lot of them.
Well, I noticed you had some. It looked like Cotman, Winsor Newton Cotman brushes.
Yes.
I love those brushes.
Yeah, and they're great. They're mainly for watercolor.
Yeah.
But
they work on all
yeah.
mediums. You know they do.
Yeah. So if I want to get small detail, and if you're working on a head that's only about half inch to 3/4 inch tall, you're going to have something pretty small.
Yeah. Well,
and they work.
I like that you brought some plein air kit with you, and that you're working on a piece, so everyone can come and see here at the show.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. I've had lovely conversations with your lovely bride, and she's asking, how can she film you and do things like that, and get you more on social media and stuff. So I hope to see more of your work on social media.
Well, thank you.
And because your work is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and she's a worker, and so trust me, it'll happen.
She has a wonderful spirit. And I was like, people want to see someone with a wonderful spirit doting on a husband.
Yep.
With a good spirit.
Well, I couldn't do it without her, so.
Yeah. And that's wonderful.
Best friend forever.
There you go. That's the right answer. So, since this will be on air online once the show is over, unfortunately, how do people see your work? Where do they go? Do you do commissions? Let's get those details.
Yes, we do commissions. We do whatever we can to kind of give something for people's walls that they that they really will enjoy. That's another thing that I guess I should say is that in a lot of ways I do this because I enjoy it.
Right.
But gosh, it's really not nice when find somebody that says, "Hey, I enjoy that too," because I'm going to find something new to enjoy tomorrow. And
exactly.
So anyway, my website is nolanparsonartist.com, and you can find us there.
All right.
So got a webpage.
So go and check out his work, and I will say this in every video because I want this to be plainly clear. Unfortunately, seeing the art in person will always be better.
Right.
Always be better than seeing the art online. So if you love what you see online, what you will receive in the mail will blow your mind.
Yeah.
So have big thoughts, have big dreams, and assist an artist. And if you love his work, then put him to work. And that's what we want to make sure to do here on the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Oh, yeah, you are very welcome. Let's say a quick couple thank yous. First off, Fairness Furniture provided these lovely chairs and some of the furniture settings here that we're using today. Thank you to them, as always, for the last couple of years that they've done this with us. And then also our sponsor of all of our podcasts, that's Johnson Madison Lumber, 300 years of combined experience. If you need any help with lumber, with anything in general, whatever you're building, Johnson Madison Lumber is absolutely incredible, and we deeply appreciate them, as always. In saying that, Nolan Parson, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you very much, and love talking with you and seeing your work.
Thank you.
So we got more coming your way right here on the podcast. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.